The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Cream cardstock, gold foil lettering. Daniel and Yemi joined in love, Malibu Cliffside, 4 p.m. Her mother called before Zara finished reading it, voice already arranged into that frequency Adiz Mensa used when she needed something and was dressing it up as love.
Hi, sweetie, it's Mom. How are you? The twins' wedding is soon. We really need you here. It won't be the same without you. Please come home.
You have to come, baby. For the family. Zara stood in her kitchen and said yes. Because she always said yes. Because 34 years of being the capable one had carved that word so deep into her bones it came out before the rest of her could catch up. If you've ever been the one nobody checks on, this story is for you. Subscribe. Let's go. She stood 6 feet from the altar in a burnt sienna dress Yemi had chosen, holding a bridal bouquet she had not been asked if she wanted to carry. Watching the man she had legally been married to for 4 years slide a ring onto her twin sister's finger like it was the most natural thing he had ever done. Pastor Amara said, "You may kiss your bride." Daniel kissed Yemi. 200 people exhaled in collective joy. Zara's grip on the bouquet tightened until her knuckles went pale. She did not cry. She did not flinch. She stood there with her jaw set like concrete and her posture so deliberately perfect that anyone paying real attention would have understood she was not watching a wedding. She was surviving one. Somewhere in the rows behind her, an old man watched this. Not the kiss. Not the bride. Not the groom wearing the borrowed smile of a man who had gotten away with something. He watched the woman in burnt sienna. He had been watching her since the moment she walked down that aisle alone and took her position beside her sister like a soldier who had already accepted the terms of a war she didn't start. His name was Osiojun. He was 71 years old, Nigerian-Korean, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of stillness that only comes from a man who has seen enough of the world to stop being surprised by any of it. And the fact that he was standing at this wedding at all, that was the part of the story that changes everything. Zara Mensa was a trauma surgeon. She decided at 9 years old, kneeling on a linoleum kitchen floor beside her father while her mother screamed for someone to do something and the ambulance took 11 minutes to arrive. 11 minutes. She had counted every single one. She became a surgeon so that she would never again be the person who could only count. Yemi had taken a different path. Yemi became someone who was extraordinarily good at being loved. Same face, same dark eyes, same thick locks their mother used to oil on Sunday mornings, but identical had always been the wrong word, because the only thing they truly shared was the biology. Adiz had a favorite and everyone knew it and nobody said it, which is the specific cruelty of that particular family arrangement. She cut Yemi's food at the dinner table when they were teenagers. Drove 3 hours for Yemi's community dance showcase. Sent Zara a forward text the day she matched into her surgical residency. "Proud of you, baby," 4 words for 12 years of work. Zara had framed the discipline, not the text. She met Daniel Ose at a hospital fundraiser when she was 29. He was charming in a way that felt like warmth, self-deprecating humor, genuine curiosity, a laugh that started deep in his chest and pulled you in before you thought to resist. He was a pharmaceutical consultant with ambitions bigger than his bank account, which Zara had understood as potential rather than warning. She was, among her many skills, extraordinarily good at believing in people. They married after 2 years. Small ceremony, courthouse, jollof, and fried plantain after. She fed him across the table and thought, "This is real. This is mine." It wasn't. For 4 years she carried them both. Her attending surgeon's salary covered the mortgage, the car payments, the dinners, the vacations he planned and she funded. She co-signed his business loan, $218,000 against her condo's equity, because that was what you did for the person you chose. She worked 70-hour weeks in a trauma bay while he worked on his pitch deck and told her, calmly and repeatedly, that her schedule made her emotionally unavailable. She introduced him to Yemi at Christmas, year 3. A small moment. She hadn't thought twice. 8 months later, Daniel sat across the kitchen table and said, "I think we've grown in different directions," with the careful tone of a man who had rehearsed it. When she asked if there was someone else, he paused, just barely, just one breath too long before saying no. The divorce finalized 11 months ago. The wedding invitation arrived 9 months after that. And here she stood. The clifftop terrace glowed amber under Edison lights strung between wooden posts. The ocean below moved the way it always did, indifferent, enormous, ongoing. The band set up near the bar. Guests moved from ceremony to reception like a slow tide, champagne flutes appearing in hands, voices lifting into the warm night air. Zara found her seat. Table 9. Not the head table. She had quietly asked to be moved when she saw the seating chart 3 days before and felt something in her chest go flat and hard. Her tablemates were a college friend of Yemi's she had never met and 2 empty chairs that felt like the venue itself was telling her something. She ordered sparkling water. She checked her pager out of habit. She kept the smile in place. "You didn't cry." The voice came from the chair beside her, the empty one that was no longer empty. She turned and found him, dark suit, silver hair, eyes the color of deep water, and a stillness about him that didn't read as coldness, but as something rarer. A man who was completely, unnervingly at home inside his own silence. She hadn't heard him sit down, and she was a trauma surgeon who noticed everything. "Excuse me," she said. "During the vows," he said. "You didn't cry. Everyone around you did. Not you." She looked at him steadily. "Most people lead with hello." "Hello." He didn't smile, but something in his expression shifted, just slightly, like a door opening 1 inch. "Oh, Seojun." He said it the way Koreans say a name, surname first, with full weight on both syllables. "Zara Mensa." She kept her voice in the register she used for difficult situations, measured, calibrated, giving away nothing. "And you're watching me because 3 years ago you saved my life," he said. "St. Cecilia's Trauma Bay. 11:47 at night. Blunt force trauma to the abdomen. Internal hemorrhage." The air changed. She knew the case. Not his name, years of patience, the specific blur of trauma work, but she knew that case because it was the night she had fought Dr. Halverson in the hallway for 9 minutes, his hand on her arm telling her she was overreacting. And she had gone to the OR anyway on nothing but her own certainty and the look in a man's eyes when the body is losing a war it hasn't admitted to yet. "You were barely conscious when they brought you in," she said carefully. "You couldn't have seen my face." "I woke up in recovery," he said. "I asked the nurse who operated. She told me." He held her gaze. "You argued for me when it would have been significantly easier to defer." "I don't forget things like that." She studied his face the way she studied everything, looking for what lived beneath the surface. Most people had an angle. Most people who offered something wanted something back, and the architecture of that want was usually visible if you knew where to look. She looked. She didn't find it. What she found instead was more unsettling, a man who was simply, straightforwardly, telling her the truth and waiting to see what she did with it. "Why are you at this wedding?" she asked. "Your ex-husband approached my investment company 18 months ago. My team flagged the family connection when we received this invitation last month." A pause. "I recognized your name. And you came." "Yes." "To a wedding you had no reason to attend." "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's not a normal thing to do." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." Something about his complete lack of defensiveness about that disarmed her in a way she hadn't anticipated. Most people, when called on something unusual, either justified it or deflected. He simply acknowledged it. "Yes, I did the unusual thing. Here I am." He reached into his jacket and placed a business card on the table. Clean white. Black text. Just a name and a number. "If you ever need anything," he said quietly, "call that." Before she could respond, a hand landed on her shoulder. Warm. Too familiar. Z. Daniel. Champagne flute in hand, easy smile already assembled. His eyes moved to Seojun and something flickered behind them, recognition, recalibration, a very quick assessment of who this man was and whether he mattered. "You look incredible." "Thank you," she said, with nothing behind it at all. Daniel extended his hand across the table. "Danose. I believe we may have met, Apex Conference, 2 years back." "We haven't," Seojun said. The hand hung in the air for 1 full second. Daniel lowered it. His smile did the thing it always did when he was recalibrating, held 1 beat too long, then reset. "Yemi's asking for family photos," he said to Zara. She stood. She picked up Seojun's card first, pressed it flat between her fingers, slipped it into her clutch. Then she looked at him, really looked, The way she looked at something she was deciding whether to trust, and said, "Thank you for the conversation." He held her gaze with that same unhurried steadiness. "I'll be here." 2 words. Simple. But the way he said them, like a door being left open rather than a promise being made, settled somewhere in her chest in a place she didn't immediately examine. She walked toward her mother, toward the cameras, toward the arrangement of family that had always required her to make herself smaller to fit into the frame. Behind her, Seo Jun watched her go. He did not look away. If you're watching this and that hit somewhere specific, share this right now. Someone in your life needs this story tonight. Keep watching. It gets so much worse before it gets better. The photos took 20 minutes. The toasts took 30. Daniel's best man called him the most loyal man I know, and Zara's sparkling water went warm in her hand, and the smile held and held and held. Her phone buzzed under the table. Credit monitoring alert. New account opened in your name, Capital One Venture X, $31,000 limit. She stared at the screen. Opened the app with hands that were steady because she was a surgeon and her hands were always steady, and watched 2 more alerts load beneath the first. Wells Fargo Personal Loan, $48,000. Chase Sapphire Reserve, $24,000 limit. $103,000. Her name. Her social security number. Her mother's maiden name as the security answer, information that lived in exactly one place. The home safe she and Daniel had shared for 4 years. The combination he still knew because she had never thought to change it, because why would she? Because she had believed him when he said the word no. She stood from the table. Walked to the north terrace. Stood at the railing where the cliff fell away to the ocean 60 feet below, and the wind was cold, and the sound of 200 people celebrating behind her was obscene. And called the number on the card. He picked up on the second ring. "Where are you?" Not hello. Not this is Seo Jun. Just immediate, oriented, present. North Terrace. Cliffside. Her voice was level, but she could feel the rage building underneath it like pressure behind a sealed door. Something's happened. 2 minutes. He was there in 90 seconds. She counted. He came to stand beside her at the railing. Close enough to see her screen when she turned it toward him. Far enough that nothing about him crowded her. He read the alerts without touching her phone. She watched his jaw set barely, just a small shift, the way a very controlled person absorbs something that requires a response he is not yet ready to give. "When did you last check your credit?" 8 weeks ago. Clean. He had access to your personal documents. Shared safe. He knew the combination. Social security card, passport copy, birth certificate, everything. Seo Jun was quiet. Behind them, the band launched into something celebratory, and the sound of people having the time of their lives scraped across the air between them. "This was timed," he said. "This week specifically," she said, and heard the cold clarity in her own voice like something stripped down to metal. "When I'm here. Publicly placed. Emotionally occupied. Less likely to be watching the accounts. There may be more." "I know." She had already been running the numbers in her head. The business loan. The cosign. $218,000 she had attached her name to because she had believed in a man who had been planning this while she worked night shifts and held strangers together with her bare hands. "I need a forensic accountant," she said. "Someone who handles financial fraud inside marriages." He reached into his jacket. This time he pulled out his phone, typed a name, turned the screen toward her. "Kim Ji-yeon. She'll call you by 9 tomorrow morning. She has handled cases far more complex than this. She is exceptional." Zara looked at the name, then at him. "Why are you doing this?" The question came out rawer than she intended. She hadn't meant to ask it like that, open, genuine, unguarded. That was not a register she used with strangers. But it was out now. Seo Jun held her gaze. The ocean moved below them. When he spoke, his voice dropped into something quieter and more deliberate. "Because you walked into a hallway and argued for a man you did not know, against a colleague with more authority and more years, on the strength of nothing but your own judgment." He paused. "Because people who do that deserve someone in their corner when the count comes due." She looked at him for a long moment. "You should know," he said, "that my world is not simple. My business interests are not all conventional. There are people who would describe what I've built in terms that are not favorable." "How unfavorable?" Significantly. She almost laughed. Not from amusement, from the specific relief of someone finally speaking to her without softening every edge into something she was expected to receive gracefully. I have removed bullets from people without asking how they got there, she said. I have worked alongside morally complicated humans since I was a resident. I am not a woman who needs protecting from information. Don't treat me like one. Something shifted in him then. A subtle release in the set of his shoulders, like something he had been bracing for simply had not arrived. I won't, he said. And then, quieter, I don't want to. She didn't go back to the reception. She texted her mother a work emergency, slipped out through the venue's side exit, and drove home with the windows down and the radio off, letting the night air do what it could. She sat in her parked car in the building's garage for 6 minutes. She always needed exactly 6 minutes. Then she went upstairs and started pulling documents. Kim Ji-yeon called at 8:52 the next morning, 8 minutes early, with the voice of a woman who had seen every variation of this particular devastation and had long since stopped being surprised by any of it. They talked for nearly 2 hours. By the end of the call, Ji-yeon had mapped the full exposure, identified 5 additional vulnerability points in Zara's financial history, and outlined a path to criminal charges that made Zara feel, for the first time since seeing those alerts the night before, like she was standing on solid ground. You have an extraordinarily strong case, Ji-yeon said. Identity theft. Wire fraud. Forgery on the business cosign. Federal exposure is possible. State criminal charges are certain. I need the original loan documents, joint tax returns from the marriage years, and your full credit monitoring history going back 3 years. You'll have everything by Thursday. A brief pause. Seo-jun said you were precise. What else did he say? That you were the kind of person who wins. Another pause. I think he's right. After the call, Zara sat at her kitchen table, her condo, her things, everything in this space entirely hers, and gave herself 4 minutes to sit with the enormity of what had been done to her. How long it had been building. How carefully it had been constructed. How close she had come to never knowing at all. Then she opened her laptop and got to work. Her mother called 3 times that week. On the 3rd call, Zara picked up. Baby, I heard what you're planning. You can't press charges against Daniel. He's family now. You know how this is going to look. He stole from me, Mama. No warm-up. No cushion. He opened credit accounts in my name without my knowledge. Forged my signature. Took over $100,000. This is not a family disagreement. This is a crime. But Yemi, what about her? Silence. Then, it will destroy her. The wedding was just last week. Zara felt something clarify inside her. The kind of clarity that only comes after years of slow burn, when the temperature finally crosses a threshold and there is simply nothing left to be confused about. I supported this family, she said, each word precise and separate. I co-signed Yemi's car loan when the dealership turned her down. I covered 4 months of your mortgage when the business was slow. I put my name on Daniel's debt because all of you needed me to be the capable one who could handle it. And now that someone has used my name to steal from me, the first person you're worried about is Yemi. That's not when you're ready to talk about what actually happened to me, Zara said. Call me back. She hung up. She blocked Yemi's number 20 minutes later, after Yemi sent a text that said, I genuinely cannot believe you're making this about yourself right now. She blocked her mother's number shortly after. The relief was physical. Like setting down something she had been carrying so long she had forgotten she was carrying it. She had dinner with Seo-jun for the first time 16 days after the wedding. He suggested a small Korean-Nigerian fusion spot in Koreatown run by a family from Lagos, deliberately understated, the kind of place where the food was extraordinary and no one cared who you were. She wore dark jeans and a cream blouse and told herself firmly that it was not a date. It was not a date. They talked for 3 hours. He told her about his world with the same directness he applied to everything, no performance, no softening, just facts laid out flat and the understanding that she could do with them what she chose. He talked about the years in Seoul building the kind of business that didn't get written about in clean publications. He talked about his mother, a woman from Enugu who had married a Korean man in the 1970s when that was not a simple thing to be in either country. who had raised him to understand that the world would require him to be twice as precise as anyone around him. He talked about what happened when you spent a life being useful to rooms that never asked if you were okay. She listened. Then she told him about residency. About the specific loneliness of being the most competent person in every room for so long that people stopped asking if you were all right because they had simply decided you always were. He listened in a way that was almost startling, not waiting for his turn to speak, not assembling his response while she was still in the middle of hers. Just receiving what she said, all of it, letting it land with full weight. Halfway through the meal, he set down his chopsticks and said, "Can I tell you something honest? Please. When I saw you at that wedding, standing in a color that wasn't yours, holding flowers that weren't yours, with a smile you had clearly been practicing for days, I wanted to walk across that terrace and tell you that you didn't have to do any of it." She looked at her glass. That would have been presumptuous. "Yes," he said simply. "That's why I didn't." She looked up at him. He was watching her with those deep, still eyes, and there was something in them she had been trying to categorize since the cliffside, a quality of attention that had nothing performative in it. He wasn't looking at her the way people looked at her when they needed something from her. He was looking at her the way she looked at a case she genuinely needed to understand. Like she was worth figuring out all the way down. "You're very direct," she said. "I find it saves time." "And do you think we have things worth saving time for?" He didn't answer immediately. He let the question breathe. She appreciated that more than she expected to. She was so tired of people who filled every silence with noise to avoid sitting inside it. "I think," he said finally, "that you're someone I would like to know. Beyond the circumstances. Beyond what I owe you." He held her gaze. "And I think you're working out whether that's a safe thing to allow." Her breath caught, just barely. She reached for her water. "I'm not usually slow at figuring things out," she said. "You're not slow," he said. "You're careful. Those aren't the same thing." She looked at him across the table in the amber light of that small, unremarkable restaurant and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not safety exactly. She did not need someone to provide that for her. She had always been her own safety. Something else. Something warmer and more specific. The feeling of being in a room with someone who is paying complete, unhurried, full attention. If this story is doing something to you right now, share it. Right now, before the next part. Someone in your life is sitting in their own version of this, and they need to hear it. Come back. It's about to get good. The case took 5 months to build. Ji-yeon was meticulous and occasionally terrifying and absolutely brilliant in the way certain women are brilliant, quietly, completely, without needing anyone in the room to confirm it. Zara gave her everything she asked for. She learned more about forensic accounting than she had ever anticipated needing to know, and she showed up to every meeting prepared, and she did not flinch once. She and Seo-jun had dinner 9 more times during those 5 months. They walked through Koreatown on a Tuesday evening, and he stopped in front of a street food cart and bought her fish cake on a stick, and she stood on the sidewalk eating it and laughed at herself for how good it was, and he watched her laugh with an expression she couldn't fully read, but didn't want to look away from. He came to the hospital one afternoon and sat in the lobby for 40 minutes while she finished a surgery that ran long, and when she came out still in scrubs with her hair pressed flat from the surgical cap, he stood and said simply, "Ready?" And she was. He met her once at 2 in the morning after a trauma call that ended badly, the kind of night that left marks. And he brought food from the all-night Korean place and sat across from her at her kitchen table and didn't say a single thing until she was ready to talk, and then when she was ready he listened to all of it. The 9th dinner at the same Koreatown restaurant, he reached across the table and covered her hand with his. No preamble. No strategy. Just his hand, warm and dry and completely steady, over hers. She looked down at it. "I need to say something," she said. "Say it." "I am not someone who needs to be carried. I have never needed that, and I am not starting now." She looked up at him. "Whatever this is, and I'm not putting a word on it yet, it has to be equal. I don't do arrangements where one person holds more than the other. I have lived that version, and it came close to unmaking me entirely." He was quiet for a moment. Outside the restaurant, Koreatown moved the way it always did, loud and layered, and completely indifferent to the specific weight of this specific conversation. I showed up at a wedding, he said, for a woman I had not spoken to in 3 years, because something felt wrong and I trusted that feeling. Not because I wanted to save you. His hand stayed over hers, steady and unhurried. Because you once trusted your own instincts about me when it would have been significantly easier to defer to someone with more authority and more years and more institutional weight. You didn't hesitate. I don't forget things like that. She looked at their hands. I want to stand next to you, he said. Not in front of you. Not behind you. Next to you. With full information and no illusions about either of our lives. No performance. No arrangement where one person quietly disappears to make space for the other. The precision of that full information, no illusions, undid something in her chest that had been knotted for so long she had stopped noticing the pull of it. Okay, she said. His thumb moved once across the back of her hand. A small, unhurried thing. She turned her hand over and held his back. The courtroom was smaller than she'd expected. She sat beside her attorney Marcus Adeyemi, calm, meticulous, the kind of lawyer who presented evidence the way a great surgeon operated, without drama, without flourish, with complete and devastating precision. For months of documentation. Gion's analysis. 3 independent handwriting experts. Bank records going back 5 years. The full architecture of what Daniel had built on her name without her knowledge, brick by brick, while she worked night shifts and signed the papers he put in front of her and believed the word no. His defense attorney was aggressive during cross-examination. Suggested she had authorized the accounts voluntarily. That the cosign had been her idea from the beginning. That this was a bitter ex-wife who had manufactured a case because she couldn't accept that her husband had moved on. Zara answered every question the way she answered difficult attendings in the trauma bay. Directly. Specifically. Without adding a single word that hadn't been asked for. Can you explain why your signature appears on this application? That is a forgery. I have provided 3 independent handwriting analyses confirming this. I can walk the court through each report individually if that would be helpful. The defense attorney recalibrated after the 3rd answer. Daniel stopped being able to look at her. She noticed. She said nothing. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty. All counts. Sentencing to follow. Restitution ordered immediately, in full. She stood in the courthouse hallway with Gion and Marcus and felt the thing she had been building toward for 5 months settle into place. Not triumph exactly, something quieter than that. The specific stillness of a person who fought for themselves, with full attention and full commitment, and refused to stop. She called Seo Jun from the parking structure. He picked up on the first ring. Guilty, she said. A pause. All counts. All counts. She heard him exhale, controlled, just barely. Like something he'd been holding for a very long time. Come to dinner, he said. Tonight. I'll be at the restaurant. You're very presumptuous, she said. Yes, he said. Are you coming? She was already walking to her car. I'll be there in 40 minutes. He was already there when she arrived. He was always already there. She slid into the seat across from him, and he looked at her face and read it entirely, the way he always did, and something in his expression softened in a way she had only seen a handful of times. You look different, he said. How? Like yourself. She felt the truth of that land somewhere deep. Like yourself. For words. She hadn't realized until that moment how long she had been performing a version of herself for audiences that didn't deserve the real one. They ordered. They ate. At some point she put down her fork and looked at him and said, I want to tell you something. He set down his chopsticks. Full attention. Always full attention, every single time. I spent 4 years married to a man who looked at me and saw a resource, she said. And before that I spent 30 years in a family that looked at me and saw a solution to whatever problem they were having that week. I became very good at being useful. I became extraordinary at being competent and available and strong. She looked at her hands on the table. I forgot that I was also allowed to just be a person. That I didn't have to earn my place in every room I walked into. Seojun was quiet for a moment. The restaurant moved around them and outside the city did what cities do, relentless and alive and completely unconcerned with the specific weight of any one conversation. I know, he said quietly. I watched you earn a room you had already more than paid for, that first night. I watched you stand 6 feet from something that should never have happened to you and hold yourself so precisely that every person around you assumed you were fine. I was not fine. No, he said. You were extraordinary. Which is a different thing entirely. She looked at him across the table. In the amber light. In the life she had taken back piece by careful piece. Seo-jun. Yes. I'm done performing for people who don't see me. She held his gaze with the full directness she used when she needed to know if something was real. I want to know if you actually see me. Not the surgeon. Not the woman who saved your life. Me. Zara. The one who sat in a parking garage for 6 minutes to put herself back together because she didn't know how to ask anyone for help. He didn't answer immediately. He did what he always did. He let the question breathe, gave it the space it deserved. Then he said, I see a woman who argues in hospital hallways for strangers at midnight. Who walks into the worst moment of her life in the wrong color dress and holds her own without asking a single person for help. Who files every sharp feeling away with precision and then is honest enough to take it back out when it matters. His voice had dropped to something very quiet. I see someone who has been the strongest person in every room she has entered for so long that she has almost forgotten she is also allowed to be held. Her throat tightened. She did not look away. I'm not asking to carry you, he said. I'm asking to be the person who stays in the room. She breathed. In. Out. The restaurant moved. Outside the city moved. Inside her chest something that had been wound tight for a very long time very slowly let go. Then stay, she said. His hand came across the table. Covered hers. That same steady warmth. This time she turned her hand over and held his back. And neither of them said anything else for a long time. Because sometimes the most important things don't need more words. Sometimes the most important thing is just the staying. 3 months later, Zara Mensah walked into the office of the chief of medicine at St. Cecilia's and came out 45 minutes later as the new chief of trauma surgery. She called Seo-jun from the parking garage, still in her interview suit, heart going faster than she usually permitted it to go. He picked up on the first ring. They offered it, she said. A beat. Then, of course they did. Don't say of course like you already knew. Zara. His voice was warm. Genuinely, quietly, completely warm. I knew the night you told me about that hallway. I have known since then. She laughed. Real and full and entirely unguarded, the kind of laugh she had forgotten she was capable of. It rang off the concrete walls of the parking structure, and she did not care even slightly. I have 6 calls to make, she said. Go make them. Seo-jun. Yes. She almost said it then. The word that had been taking shape for months, building the way the most important things build, not in dramatic moments, but in the quiet accumulation of ordinary ones. Dinners. Walks. His hand over hers. The specific way he said her name like it was something he meant. She saved it. She was still learning the timing of certain things. Thank you, she said, for showing up at that wedding. A pause. When he spoke, his voice had shifted, just beneath the stillness, something warmer and more unguarded than she had ever heard from him. Thank you, he said quietly, for still being there to show up for. She did not get a fairy tale. She got something she trusted far more. The fraudulent accounts were closed. The restitution payments began arriving on schedule. Her credit climbed back to where it had been before Daniel and then past it, because she had learned things in the last year that made her sharper and more precise and harder to reach. Her mother called 8 weeks after the verdict. Voice smaller than Zara had ever heard it. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't understood the full weight of what had happened. Zara listened to all of it and then said, clearly and without anger, the door is not closed. But it is not open on demand. I will call when I am ready. Not before. Yemi moved to Vancouver. Zara learned this from a cousin and felt, to her own mild surprise, almost nothing, which told her everything she needed to know about how much of that relationship had been obligation wearing the costume of love. And Seo-jun, complicated and honest and present, who looked at her like she was worth the full attention, who challenged her when she deflected and stayed when she was difficult and never once suggested she make herself smaller to fit more comfortably into anyone's expectations, was there. At the table. Beside her. Not in front. Not behind. Next to. For the first time in her adult life, Zara Mensah was not performing strength for a room full of people who expected it from her. She was simply, completely, fully herself. And she was seen. If this story moved something in you tonight, share it with someone who needs it. Right now, before you scroll past. Like this video if you're riding with Zara. Subscribe if you want more stories about women who stopped disappearing and started choosing themselves. Drop a comment and tell me, what was the moment in the story that hit you the hardest? The wedding? The credit alerts? The moment she said then stay? I read every single comment. Every one. I'll see you in the next one. Don't miss it.